Vine Talks, be fruitful.
Welcome to the second episode of Vine Talks, in which I sit with my good friend Ronnie and we discuss and unpackage a part of my journey, and hopefully the nuggets that come out of my life can hopefully be used as stepping stones for you to climb through your ladder of success. If you want to know more about me, Paul Serukenya, just watch the first YouTube recording in which I actually shared my story, and I say that basically I'm a first-class University of Leeds graduate with electronics engineering degree, and I also hold a master's in pharmacy. But in this episode, we're going to talk about starting over, because it was not always like that for me. It never was. And when I sought for people that could teach me to actually create what I didn't have these people in my life. And so I just thought that if I can take my life and put it out there, that you can watch the bits that helped me become who I am, that they can also help you become the best expression of yourself. So let's get started. How do you start over? Well, for me, it began at the age of 19 as I walked through the ports of Heathrow Airport in the United Kingdom. I had just 20 kilograms of belongings and a 50-pound note in my pocket. But that's not all I had. I had actually got a background in which I'd actually lived through 4 wars. 4 wars. Do you know what it means for a teenager to actually walk past dead bodies and still go back home and do homework? And watch your dad try to get you to your place of school, and then he drops you off at school and says, hey, have a great day, and then you have to watch him go away and pray that dad comes back home to pick you up, and that's yet another day. And you have to find your way from school, going back to your home, driving past dead bodies yet again, and you think, wow, this is yet another day. I just hated going back home. Until one day I told my dad, Dad, I can't take this anymore, please let me go. So this is the 19-year-old boy now with 50 pounds in his pocket and a dream to actually become what they were not. As I walked around the streets of London, I looked for a place where I could actually find any odd job that could help me become what I wasn't. Until at one point I spent all my 50 pounds on transport looking for jobs, and I was basically stripped down to nothing. Now I was down to my bare feet, walking from city to city, door to door, hotel to hotel, looking for any kind of job that could be used to help me become the best expression of myself. But as I walked along the streets of London, I was amazed because I finally found a diversity in the culture. At one end, in the night in Hyde Park, top sort of end of London, I would see the rich drive their Bentleys and their Ferraris, and they were having a kind of expression of success that I hadn't seen before. And yet just an hour away from the same location, I found people living in boxes. Now, you have to understand that the African in me was trying to reconcile how could a British white person with an environment where you have, all the DNA, all the genetics of success actually built in this place. And yet in this same environment, you have 2 extremes of the same kind of people, but with different levels of success. That perplexed me. And that is what helped me pick up the first nugget in my success ladder. Nugget number 1 is this. Success has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with your geographical location. If you can have 2 people that have been exposed to the same education system, same geography, same environment, same opportunities, turn out to have such a diversity in their lives, that quickly told me that there must be something that I'm missing here. So as you watch this podcast, you might actually think that, I'm living in a country that actually doesn't give me the opportunities. Like, you're blaming the government, you're blaming the syllabus, you're blaming your dad, your mom, you're blaming the geographical location you are. You could be actually living in some village in Mawokota or somewhere in Luton or somewhere in Massachusetts. I don't care where you come from. Success does not have an address. Success has nothing to do with your geographical location. I quickly took that on and I thought, hang on. If I can be in an environment that is teaching this to me, then surely I can turn my life around without actually relying on the interpretation of where I actually will ultimately be is a result of where I am. So I got myself together and I thought, right, what do I need to do in order to climb up my ladder of success? Step 2, I had to have a plan. To create what I didn't have, I had to have a plan. So this was me sat down one day with a friend of mine, and he's an architect, and he'd built this huge building somewhere in central London. And I sat him down and I told him that, you know what does it take to build the thing that you have actually created over there, physical structure? And he sat down with me and he said, well, Paul, I sit down and I have a vivid idea of what it is that I want to create. And I get a pen and a paper and I begin to structure it down. I write it down. I decide where the toilets will be in this building. I decide where the lift will be. I decide where the disabled people will pass. I decide every little bit of what it takes to create what I don't have. And then I put it down on paper. But before it's approved, he told me that I have to get a structural engineer to come and decide whether the bits that are put in the architecture drawing actually will hold when they are put out in the light. And it's interesting, he told me he goes through this whole process, but as he explained the story, I quickly realized that to create what I didn't have, I have to have a plan. I have to have a plan. A building starts off as a piece of paper, and in the same way, who I ultimately become has to be a result of what I plan to create for myself. I realized that, okay, my geography has nothing to do with where I wanted to be, so I have to sit down and create my plan to become what I wasn't. So I wanted to become an engineer, but I didn't have a plan. What do I mean by a plan? Had I decided which university I wanted to go to? No. So I ticked that off. I had to go to Leeds University. Have I decided what room I'm going to stay in? I didn't have that. So I decided E1.04 James Bailey Flats, Leeds. I wrote to them. I secured my place. Now I had a vivid idea of where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, where I wanted to live. To create what you don't have, to start over, you must have to create a plan for you. What is it that you want to have? I then took some time to assess myself, to ask myself that, well, how can I become what I'm not if I don't have people that can hold my hand and coach me to become what I wasn't? I can't become something that I'm not taught. So to fix that problem, I had to assess my crowd. Step 3 on creating what you are not. Step 3 on starting over is you have to find your people. Find the people that are a true interpretation of where you want to be. I found my people. And to be honest, the people that I had were not physical people. They were not people that I actually could pick up the phone and call and say, have a cup of tea with, because there was no one in my community that was an ideal representation of who I wanted to be. There's no one as a 19-year-old boy that I could go up to and say that when I grow up, I want to be like you. So I sought these people, and these people were actually virtual friends. I sat myself down in bookshops. Every weekend, I would sit in Waterstone's bookshop in the self-help section, and I found the virtual people that would help me become what I wasn't. And they taught me how to dream. They taught me how to structure my life. They taught me how to evaluate where I was. They taught me how to qualify my time. They taught me where I needed to spend my time. And as I spent time in this environment, quickly the thing just gravitated onto me, and I suddenly began to become a different person altogether. To create what you don't have, you have to find the right people around you. Yes, even went down to my salary. I realized that the salary that I aspired to be, I had to have people that actually had salaries that were an ideal representation of the kind of salary that I wanted to have. And I found that as I grew closer to these people, their conversations were different. They were not broke conversations. They were conversations of the rich. They were conversations of creativity. They were conversations that gravitated onto me. And slowly by slowly, I began to think the same way, and I began to move the same way. And I began to climb up that ladder. The fourth thing that I had to find was, hang on, I know I wanted to become an engineer. I knew where I wanted to go. I had the people that had coached me to become what I wasn't. The only thing that was missing was my account didn't have the money. And I began to realize that many times we rule ourselves out of opportunities because of the balance on our account. Then quickly I thought, hang on, the balance on my account cannot determine my destiny. After 1 year of hard labor, I'd saved £3,000. But the course that I had to do was a £10,000 a year course. So to complete it, I needed to have £30,000. But I quickly realized something that I can look back to and share, that you don't necessarily have to connect all the dots in your life before you make this next move. There is a miracle in the word start. With £3,000 in my pocket, I got onto the National Express bus and I went to a city I'd never been to before. I paid for the first time of my education and I started. Boy, it wasn't easy. I ate one meal a day. I sometimes missed lunch, I missed supper, but I went through the day and I went through the next day and the next day and the next day. I really can't go in this podcast on how I actually completed my whole 3-4 years, but one thing I know for sure is that the universe aligns itself for you when you decide to take that first step that's called start. So the fourth step was this: follow your heart. Follow your heart and not your account. Your account will rule you out of things that you could actually achieve, but your heart will gravitate you towards the things that you can achieve. The last step on the journey, on starting over, is paying the price. Many times we get to only sit down and hear the end of the story when we sit down with people that we consider to be successful. But if you had an opportunity to sit down with someone who's successful, I dare you to ask them the question, what price did you pay to get to where you are? Because the miracle is in understanding the price. To create what you don't have, you have to pay the price to become. I learned this message when I was about 36, and I thought, hang on, at the top of my engineering game, I was now sitting down with definers of the next generation of products that haven't yet even hit the streets. You know, I was marketing products to the likes of Nokia, the likes of Samsung. And I was sitting down with product definers, people who have the kind of knowledge that is going to make them competitive 2-3 years from now. But you need to understand that I came from a place in Africa where to this date, there's no tarmac at the place that I call home. But now I'm sitting down with product definers that are defining technologies for the next generation. So with that in mind, I took a step back and I thought, hang on, if I'm at the top of my game, why would I want to be anything else? But in my heart, I knew that I could actually create something else inside of me. So at the age of 36, I dared to take a step back. I dared to become a pharmacist. And this journey at the age of 36 took me back to study with 16, 17-year-old kids studying biology and chemistry. And I paid the price. I went through university. I did, whilst people were having social lives, and I was in the library trying to become what I wasn't. I really can't share in this podcast the price I had to pay to become what I had. But today I can say for sure I'm where I am because of the price that I paid. Question: are you ready to pay the price to become what you're not? To become what you're not, you have to pay the price. So as I wrap this podcast on Vine Talks, we have studied, what does it take to start over? Number one, ignore where you are, because your geographical location has absolutely nothing to do with where you can actually end up in life. Number two, have a plan. Step 3, find your people. Step 4, follow your heart and not your account. Step 5, pay the price. That's me, Paul Serukenya, on Vine Talks.